Please.
Thank you very much. Dobro jutro. Can it be heard well?
Yes, excellent.
Okay. So one moment for share the presentation. I am. Well, one moment, please. I would like to share the presentation, but I don't find it. You are watching the presentation? No.
The first page, yes.
The first page. Oh, okay, perfect. Wow. So, but I don't see for. You see, but I not.
I see the building of the university. Maybe it's not.
No, I would like to share the text.
Okay.
This, but oh, please, how can I? Wow, a moment. Well, I see the text.
Yeah, you can proceed without the presentation, maybe. Yes.
You see the image of our university is very nice.
So perhaps Enrique, you can sign out of sharing presentation, then try again to share a presentation, and then choose the presentation. Okay. Now try to share again.
Okay.
And when it asks you what to share, maybe to choose the presentation. If not, we have it here. I have it on the computer, and we can run it from here.
Okay. Maybe in Word is possible or only PDF?
I believe only PDF.
This is the problem. Yes. So well, I think that it's better to talk because to begin, because if not, it's a problem. So I read the presentation.
So this. Can you see your presentation?
Okay. Thank you.
So we have it, and then you just let know Marco that it needs to go down and so on.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes. I am seeing. Okay. Well, good morning. Dobro jutro. Warm greetings from Barcelona, from Seu Batoliva University. I would like to thank Dr. Sasa Horvat for inviting me to participate in this conference. I regret that I am unable to attend on this occasion, but I hope to be able to do so in the future. It's a pleasure to contribute with some reflections on memory from a philosophical perspective. I am also delighted to be able to initiate in this way a collaboration between our two universities, which I hope will be very fruitful in the future. In this paper, we'll try to show how, in the thoughts of St. Thomas Aquinas, faithful to his Augustinian heritage, complementing what has been said by other speakers, intellect and will are distinguished, and both find their roots in the memory of oneself. And this is according to the profound and fruitful intellect of Aquinas' doctrine carried out at the Thomist School of Barcelona, mainly by Ramon Orlandis, Jaime Bofill, Francisco Canals, and others. To this end, we will begin by expounding the metaphysical foundation of the mind according to Augustine's doctrine of good created according to mode, species, and order, so that we may explain the distinction in the mind between memory, intellect, and will. But before addressing this exposition, it is appropriate to recall, as a preamble to it, that fundamental approach taken by Nicolas Berdyaev in relation to idealism. The fundamental problem of gnoseology consists in knowing who knows, and whether the one who knows belongs to being. This question must be extended to know who love and whether the one who loves belongs to being. The fact that the mind is realized that memory, intellect, and will help us to answer this question. In St. Thomas metaphysics, esse is the actuality of the being by which it is perfect and good. Esse, or art of being, act of being, is also the actuality of the intellectual creature and all its perfections. But the way of measuring which esse is received is, in this case, very different from that of other beings. In fact, esse is participated by the intellectual creature without dependence on matter, which is called subsisting. Such independence occurs even when it naturally entails in man the substantial union of the soul with a body. Not depending on matter allows the intellectual creature, both angelic and human, to participate in esse under its reason of infinity. It is now necessary to understand what this subsistence or mode proper of the intellectual creature in its independence from matter entails. St. Thomas, quoting the Liber de Causis, characterizes subsistence as an returning to oneself. We find ourselves precisely at the core of the Augustinian Thomistic metaphysic of the spirit, which we attempt to outline in this paper following the teachings of the Thomistic School of Barcelona. Returning to oneself, therefore, means knowing oneself. But we must remember that the soul can know itself in two ways, as Aquinas teaches, following St. Augustine once again. One consists in the intellect of the soul in its essence through a concept that can be universally stated with regards to every soul, but the other is that which each man has of himself according to his esse in such an individual, that is, in his singularity, perceiving that he has esse. Thus, this knowledge of oneself with regard to one's own esse is that which corresponds to subsistence according to the mode of the intellectual creature. So, such knowledge is therefore given not according to a mode of objectivity, but of presence of the very act of being. And Jaime Bofill calls the knowledge by way of presence memory. We thus find the term that underpins our reflection, memory, taken from St. Augustine. After asking himself in Confessions, but how can the mind, no, in Confessions, no, in the Trinitate, but how can the mind, when it is not thinking, not be in its gaze, since it can never be itself without itself? He answered, when it is not thinking, it is certainly not in its gaze, nor its knowledge of itself formed, but nevertheless, it knows itself as being for itself the memory of itself. This memoria sui should not be understood as a faculty comparable to intellect and will. On the contrary, memory refers directly to the very act of being of the intellectual creature, which, unrestrained by matter, is evident to itself in the subsistence of the act itself. Since one's own esse is habitually present to itself, it can be named as memory, that is, memory of itself, memory of its own esse. Memory of past events will only be possible from a radical recognition of one's own identity subsisting in the memory of oneself. But we have indicated that this is a habitual knowledge of one's own essence. Certainly, when speaking of existential knowledge of oneself, a distinction must be made between the habitual and the actual. The latter, actual, occurs in the exercise of cognitive or appetitive operations, but habitual knowledge, on the contrary, occurs through the very presence of the soul to itself. And just as we said that memory is not a faculty, the term habitual here does not mean an habit characterized by its potentiality, but the very essence of the soul characterized by its actuality. The soul is always present to itself, even if it is not in the act of knowing itself. The memory of itself reveals the unity and distinction of each subsistence in an intellectual nature. Hence, it has been given a name that signifies this singularity, namely person, says Aquinas. Since subsisting in rational nature is of the highest dignity, every individual or rational nature is called a person. Therefore, this memory of oneself must be understood as an intimate and personal knowledge, rather than a subjective one. And that is why Francisco Canals states, if we did not recognize this existential gnosisness, that belongs to every man by virtue of his being, we will not be able to explain everyday human sociability, family, or folks traditions, or the writing of autobiographical memoirs such as St. Augustine's Confession, to cite just one prime example, nor will the knowledge of history be of contemplative interest, nor will so many writings enriching human knowledge have been able to emerge in literature, in novels, or in theater, attentive with primacy and depth to human life in its singular and existential nature. End on the quote of the quote. The essay of the intellectual creature, according to its mode participation, refers, like that of every entity, to God the Creator, ipsum esse subsistens. But in this case, God is the ultimate cause of a subsistent being that has memory of itself. This means that the Creator's purpose with regards to intellectual subsistence is precisely to make them participants to a certain extent in the knowledge that he has of himself. As St. Thomas affirms, commenting on the meaning of returning to oneself, proper to the subsistence, to subsist by oneself is not fitting for God. Hence, according to this way of speaking, he himself is not fatally the one who returns to his essence and who knows himself. Every intellectual creature, therefore, knows itself in the same way that God knows himself. St. Thomas then adds that this allowed the intellectual creature not only to return to itself, but even to return to God. The memory of oneself then becomes memory of God. We have, is the next page, we have managed to identify in memory of oneself the way in which actus of being, or esse, is participated in by the intellectual creator, but we still need to relate it to intellect and will. Memory, relate with intellect and will, as we proposed at the beginning, on the basis of the triad mode, species, and order corresponding to all creative good. To do so, we will start from the two ways of assigning this triad to the mind according to the distinction that St. Thomas takes from St. Augustine. First, as notitia et amor, and second, as memoria, intelligentia et voluntas. Both consider the first to be an imperfect image of the Trinity, insofar as it relates to habit and potency, and the second to a perfect image, insofar as it relates to act. Let us consider the imperfect image first. The imperfection of the triad mens notitia et amor consists in significant potentiality of virtuality, as in its principles, the cognitive and volitional acts proper to the perfect image. In this way, mind generally signifies the power of the soul, while notitia and amor refer specifically to the intellect and the will as principles of their respective acts. On the other hand, if memory, intelligentia, and voluntas refer to actuality, they must be understood as acts and not as powers. Memory here designates the subsistence of the mind as present in act to itself, as already explained. But at the same time, memory refers commonly to mens notitia et amor, insofar as his presence is habitual, and Hess and Thomas sometimes refer to mind, knowledge, and love as consubstantial habits. In this way, both the mind, knowledge, and love signify the same essence of the subsistent spirit, insofar as it is habitually present to itself. They are not three distinct realities, but three different reasons for the same reality, mens notitia amor. Mens give reason to the spirit by referring directly to its subsistent being according to its own mode of participation. Notitia refers to the mind itself as intelligible to itself according. For this reason, we say that the intellectual subsistent person is true. More than that, is the most true, insofar as it is intelligible in act for itself, and is capable from that intelligibility of knowing itself in act. And amor, finally, refers to the mind itself as lovable to itself according to its own order of or inclination. That is why we say that the intellectual subsistent person is good. More than that, it is the most good, insofar as it is lovable in act to itself, and is therefore capable of then loving itself in act. In short, this triad mens notitia et amor means the memory of oneself according to what we are, and we know that we are, and we love that we are and know, in the words of St. Augustine. The notitia and love of memory not only relate to self-knowledge and self-love, but also to the knowledge and love of other things. It is precisely from the memory of oneself, insofar as we find in the knowledge and love of oneself, that the intellectual powers and their respective acts emanate. Referring to this primacy of self-memory with respect to intellect powers, Francisco Canals clearly affirms the thesis we defend here. Don't read the quote. To what is this primacy of memory due? To the fact that it suits the reason of esse as act, the subsistence of the act of itself being esse, the actuality of all things and ever of the form themselves, says Aquinas. Let us not forget that the intellectual creature is capable of returning to itself thanks to its subsistence, which is not limited by matter, and we state at the beginning. Well, then we must conclude by way of synthesis that the intellectual subsistence experiences all its cognitive and appetitive operation at its own, present at all times in its substantial memory. And in this way, it's possible to answer that initial questions taken from Berdayev. Who knows and loves? The answer is the one who has memory of himself. Let us end this part with a few words from Martínez, also from the Thomistic School of Barcelona, who has perfectly understood and assumed the thesis presented here. In this way, says Echevarría, we could perhaps say that substantial knowledge and love, that is spiritual substance as intelligible and lovable in act, are precisely the condition of possibility and the root from which these powers, which are indeed accidents in the creator, emanate, which, due to their reflective nature, always keep their substantial origin present in their operation. Therefore, in every act of intelligence, in addition to the object, the mind perceives or feels itself as the root of the act, and in every act of love, that like in the image, Cyrano de Bergerac, in every act of love, the will does not cease to be present to itself as something radically loved. Conclusion. We have been able to verify, based on the characterization of the creator good, small, spacious, and ordered, the rootedness of the intellect and the will in the memory of itself. But the false unitary intellect between all of them will be achieved by their ordering to the ultimate end. And this end, for which the universe is created, say Aquinas, and in the most perfect thing that is the personal subsistence, is divine goodness itself. That is why all cognitive and appetitive operations rooted in the memory of oneself are ordered to attain the contemplation of God in glory. There, knowledge and love are united in synthesis, as we read in St. Gregory the Great. Amor ipse notitia est. In this contemplation, the memoria sui will have returned to its ultimate origin as memoria Dei. And then each person will recognize himself from the knowledge and love that God has for him, as St. John of the Cross teaches in the commentary of the Apostle. For just as, according to St. Paul, the soul will then know as it is known by God. So to will it love is loved by God. For just as its intellect will then be the intellect of God, so to will be the will of God. To all perfective dynamism of human life is characterized by preparing oneself for this contemplation, dissipating is as far as possible. This is achieved above all in true friendship, with that union which is not only affective, but also one of intimate confidence about one's own personal life. Jaime Bofill writes enthusiastically, through friendship, loneliness is definitively overcome as both our aspirations to be understood, appreciated, and loved are satisfied, as well as those in the opposite direction to pour out the fullness of our hearts in peaceful confidence to others. Through friendship, man is placed in his true environment, namely family and society, and occupies his place in the universe. The measure of this perfection and the corresponding joy will be glimpsed by considering what it means, the enrichment of a person, but by what is the most valuable in the entire universe, namely by another person who gives of oneself not in some of their more or less external aspect of possession, but by introducing us into the intimacy of their life and essence. Friendship is the place where one shares one's memory of oneself, so that one friend opens up the secrets of his heart to another friend, as St. Thomas explains. That is why the memory of oneself is the memory of the heart. It is not surprising that St. John 23 describes St. Thomas' doctrine as sapientia cordis, wisdom of the heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Martínez.